Good evening. Happy Halloween. Welcome on in. Tonight we're starting with something a bit different. So over the past month, I rewatched the entire Halloween franchise. It'd been quite a few years since I'd seen all of them, and it's one of my favorite horror franchises, so I figured, it's a good opportunity to rewatch the whole series. We haven't had a new movie in a couple of years, so why not? Let's do a tier list. First time I've ever done one of these, so let's see how it goes. I think I have some controversial rankings, some very generic vanilla rankings too, but some that'll, I don't know, maybe get me some hate. We'll see. So just running down, so we have our typical tier list, S, A, B, C, and then the last one is either D or F, just the bottom of the barrel. So with the names, I went with, for our S tier, You Can't Kill the Boogeyman, best of the franchise, or at least my favorites. And then in the A rank, we have Happy Halloween, good, maybe some flaws, but overall, still really enjoy it. The C rank, I Shot Him 6 times. They're okay, they're entertaining, not the best, not bad, but just right in the middle, 3-ish stars, so on. In our C ranking, we have Trick or Treat Motherfucker. Not the worst, maybe have some entertaining moments, some fun, but definitely not the best, but almost the worst, but just scraping by. And then in our D or F tier, we have Stop It, Stop It, Stop It. These are the movies that I don't care for in this franchise, and you'll see what goes down there in a little bit here. All right, so starting off with the classic John Carpenter's Halloween 1978, and no surprise to anyone. I mean, if you look behind me, you can tell I got some Halloween stuff up here. I absolutely love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's going right up to You Can't Kill the Boogeyman. Some people think it's overrated, and you know, it's definitely tame when we compare it to today's slashers. If you look at things like Terrifier, with the amount of gore that goes on in that movie, this is way more toned down and tame. Came out in 1978. Standards are a little different, but it remains a classic for a reason. It definitely took elements that from early slashers like Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, but it seemed to perfect those elements and made, I think, the quintessential slasher film. The score is absolutely phenomenal. I love the music in this movie. It's one of my favorite aspects of the film. It is my favorite John Carpenter film. It's usually comes down between either The Thing or Halloween. I do think The Thing is probably a better made movie, I guess. There's a lot of great things to love about the movie. I still think that's a perfect film. I just get slightly more enjoyment out of this movie. If I had one very, very, very infinitesimally small nitpick, it's that it took me a while to realize this. This film was shot in California, so it doesn't look like the way Halloween looks in the Midwestern United States. It detracts slightly from, I think, the autumnal feel of the film. But nevertheless, it's still an essential October viewing for me. I've watched it like 3 times this month. That's probably peewee numbers compared to some other people, but it's one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. I love it. I remember when I first watched it. Yeah, fun fact about this movie, actually, Robert Englund was, speaking of like sort of the autumnal feel or lack thereof in this movie, Robert Englund was in this movie as one of the people that threw the leaves around to make it look at least like it's autumn, even though you can tell all the rest of the trees are green. But anyway, I love this movie. It'll always remain one of my favorites. Now on to Halloween 2. So the same night, he picks up immediately after the first one. I think it's a good sequel, but it weirdly feels, as much, you hear some people say that Halloween 78 is slowly paced. I think Halloween 2 feels more slowly paced than the original, but nevertheless, I think it is a fun movie to watch immediately after the original to do a double billing. I wouldn't ever just throw Halloween 2 on just to watch it by itself. The only time I would ever watch it is if I'm doing a back-to-back Halloween 1, Halloween 2 watch double billing. And that's my primary reason that I think it's going to go into I shot him 6 times. That's where this quote came from. Immediately, the very beginning of the movie. That's where it comes out. There's definitely more gore and carnage. So yeah, Halloween 78's tame. Halloween 2 amps up the gore. I think it was following in something like Friday the 13th's footsteps a little bit. But yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis being sidelined for most of this film, I don't think is the most interesting thing to do with her character. They do that more than once in this franchise. I'm also, I think, neutral regarding the sibling sort of spin on things that Michael and Laurie are brother and sister in this. I don't hate it, but I do think it makes Michael's motivation a bit less scary than like in the original. He's just pure evil. There's no rhyme or reason why he's doing what he's doing. So making the whole brother sister angle come in, that sort of explains his motivation, makes it a bit less scary. I do think the score is worse in Halloween 2. It has this weird like techno beat to it of the original score. It's not bad. It just sounds pretty goofy when you compare it to the original. Overall, I think the film lacks the ambiance and just the Halloween-y feel that the first one has. Also being set almost the majority of the movie inside a hospital makes it feel less Halloween-y. I mean, if you're scared of hospitals, maybe this movie freaks you out more, but to me it just felt it was lacking sort of the Halloween charm that the original had. Another maybe nitpicky thing about this film is that Michael does look different. It's a different actor playing him than Nick Castle in 78. It's the same mask, actually. The mask sat under Deborah Hill's, I think it was her mattress for like however many years in between 1 and 2, so it flattened out. And also Dick Warlock, who portrayed Michael in Halloween 2, has a bigger head than Nick Castle, so the mask looks weirdly stretched, so you're gonna get kind of a silly look. I don't like that we see his eyes. You're not supposed to see his eyes. He's the devil's eyes, the blackest eyes, right? But that's a problem that several of the sequels have, so I'm not going to hold it just against this film. All right, time for what might be a hot take, because it seems like in recent years, people have really come around to this movie. But I'm sorry, it's not for the reasons that you think. It has nothing to do with that Michael's not in it. Halloween 3 is going into stop it, stop it, stop it. The Silver Shamrock jingle is catchy as fuck. I love listening to that throughout this movie. And honestly, my memory of this film is a lot better than my experience of watching it this time around. I think I've only seen it twice before this viewing, and I don't know, I was just super let down this time. Tom Atkins' character is super charismatic. He's this attractive doctor, right? He's our main character that we follow throughout this, and that kind of explains his lecherousness. So I watched this with the director's commentary, and even the director's poking fun at him hitting on like every single female character in the movie. So that was a running gag throughout. This feels more mystery sci-fi than a straight up horror film. It's certainly not a slasher like the rest of them, so maybe for some people that's a breath of fresh air, and that's not automatically a negative, but sci-fi can be a harder sell for me. But my biggest complaint about this movie for this watch, maybe next time I'll watch it, it'll go up, but I was just so bored watching this movie this time around. For most of its runtime, I was just bored, and that is a major drawback for me. The drawn out buildup of like ramping up to the third act might work for some people, but I'm just not entertained by 2/3 of this movie. If I don't care about a movie up until the last 25 or so minutes, that's a huge negative for me. It has nothing to do with Michael Myers not being in the film. Technically, he's in it for a brief second on TV. I just don't care for the plot beats of this movie. This easily has the darkest ending of all the Halloween films, but I just don't like the reveal of Connell Cochran's mustache twirling plan. Focusing on the actual pagan holiday of Samhain, however the fuck you pronounce it, is cool, but the motivation behind it feels very cartoonish. So yeah, maybe that's a hot take to have it towards the bottom, but that's where we land. This is my list, not your list. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. This is easily one of my favorite Halloween sequels. Honestly, it feels more Halloween-y than the first. We follow our main character, Jamie Lloyd, trick-or-treating throughout most of this film, or a good chunk of it. I think Jamie and Rachel are great lead characters. Another hot take, I think Rachel is a stronger final girl than Laurie Strode, at least as she is portrayed in the first two films. Michael going after his niece, a little kid, certainly raises the stakes. And I also like how he almost like methodically takes down the town. He goes for the power plant to kill the power. He takes out the police force, and he gets like our main characters cornered in this house so he can go in and go after Jamie. It almost goes without saying that his mask looks absolutely terrible in this. It kind of has a very squished look to it. But I actually don't think it's the worst mask in the franchise. I'll get to that in a little bit. The mob mentality in this, I think, is more well done, and it's way more believable than what we see later on in Halloween Kills. Yeah, I'll talk about that when we get there. The ending of this film, of Halloween 4, I think kicks ass. The evil transfers, and honestly, you could watch Halloween 1, 2, and 4 as its own contained trilogy, and I think it's a badass trilogy. The evil transfers, Jamie as our new sort of avatar of evil or something like that, right? If they were to ever do another Legacy sequel, but they didn't want to bring back Mile, they didn't want to bring back Laurie, this is not an original thought, I've heard this, other people talk about this, but bring Danielle Harris back. I think she would be totally up for it. Bring her back as our killer. She'd be the right age for however many years later it is. Let Michael be dead, at least for a few films. I think following her, she stayed in the horror genre. I think that would be awesome. So Halloween 4 for me goes in Happy Halloween. I don't think it's on the same tier as the original, but I think it's a really fun, really good Halloween film. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. So I think this is Halloween as a horror franchise several times commits sort of the sin of following up a great ending with a terrible start to their next film. And this is where it starts for me. It's such a disappointing follow-up to Halloween 4's awesome ending. I don't hate the movie as a whole, but I think it could have been so much better. Despite my complaints, it still has a lot of Halloween vibes to it, and I'm still entertained throughout. So, yeah, I do think... So, the beginning of this movie, our main character, Jamie, is a mute throughout most of... like half of the film or something like that. Something feels sleazy about that. I don't know if you can pay a child actress less because she doesn't have as many lines, but I also think that she was a good child actress, so it feels kind of like a waste to not give her any dialogue. Still, she does great with the nonverbal parts. The parts where she's like is kind of goofy, but she pulls it off. Killing Rachel, so I like Rachel as our final girl in part 4. Killing her off sort of unceremoniously in the 5th one just really bummed me out. If you're gonna do that, I don't mind that they do it, but they should have done it at the end of this one in a much more meaningful way. And her replacement, Tina, not an exactly equivalent substitute, but I don't know. I find her kind of endearing. She is a little bit annoying, but I think she's kind of cute. And like I said, she's endearing, and she genuinely cares about Jamie. She doesn't leave her just by herself. Yeah. And, you know, she sacrifices herself to protect Jamie. Yeah. So I think she's okay. They don't address the evil being transferred into Jamie, which when I watched the director's commentary of part 4, he definitely confirmed that this happened, that the evil transferred, but it's sort of as ignored as this weird psychic link between uncle and niece. And for some reason, also the mom is retconned to have survived Jamie attacking her at the end of 4. So I don't know, just a whole bunch of questions and sort of odd choices going on with part 5. I do like that they go back to the Myers house. I think it's a cool, creepy set piece. The way that Dr. Loomis entices Michael to get back there, his speech is really great. It's definitely not the same house as we saw in the first one. Like, you can visibly tell that it is a different design of the house, but nevertheless, I think it's a cool, creepy set piece. The scene where Jamie is stuck in the laundry chute, like she was actually inside there with a real knife going in. That's a cool, tense scene. The scene where she's in the attic with Michael and they have this, I don't know if it's like a tender moment or something like that. She gets him to take off his mask and then he quickly goes back into rampage mode. I don't know. I like those scenes a lot. The Man in Black's mystery is okay, but following this film up with Halloween 6, which I'll talk about here in a second, kind of lets it down. Just leaving it on a cliffhanger. Kind of meh about. The mask in Halloween 5, I think, is the worst mask in the franchise. I think it looks so goofy. It has a much more pointed nose and the upper lip is like flared up. And it has this weird neck flare. It's not like tucked into his like coveralls. It just looks so dumb. I think it's the worst in the franchise. I hear people say part 4 looks the worst. I think part 5, the mask, is the worst. But despite all that, like despite some of my complaints, I think I enjoy it more than I dislike it. I'm certainly easy to please with some horror franchises, so I think it goes below Halloween 2, but still in our middle category of I shot him 6 times. I think it's fun. It's enjoyable. It certainly has its problems, though. Oh boy. Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. I watched the producer's cut with the commentary from the screenwriter and the composer. They couldn't even get, I guess, to get the director or anyone else of note to comment on this film. This is probably my least favorite in the franchise, so I'm just going to put it right there below Halloween 3. The whole cult angle and the sort of Paul Rudd's character using the runes to like trap Michael briefly, I just think it's all so stupid, and it eliminates any mystery or scariness around Michael Myers. The character of Dr. Wynn, someone we saw for like 30 seconds in the first film, being the sort of mastermind behind it all, such a dumb twist. Yeah, I don't know. Just I don't like it. Bringing Tommy Doyle back, I think, is fine. That's totally acceptable. Makes sense that, you know, he would maybe become obsessed with, like, I don't know, keeping track of Michael's movements and whatnot, especially after what happened to him in the first one. I actually prefer his characterization in this over Halloween Kills, but Paul Rudd's performance in this is just terrible. I don't know if that was intentional, like, because the character is supposed to be so odd and strange, or if it was an early role for him. He certainly, if it was bad acting, he certainly has gotten a lot better, but it's just not good in this, no matter what way you sort of shake it. It's not a great send-off for Donald Pleasence as a whole. It is sweet that the film is dedicated to his memory. I think he died during the making of this, so they had to do some scenes without him, but I wish he could have gotten a better send-off. It has a good Halloween-y feel to it. Lots of low-lit candlelight throughout the houses. Michael's mask looks a lot better. Michael is pretty vicious in this movie, but man, I just don't like this movie. Oh, one other thing. So the dad, I don't, it's unclear to me, is it supposed to be the same dad, the same adoptive father that Laurie has in the first one? That's unclear to me. John Strode, that character, is just absolutely terrible. You're not supposed to like him, but I think you can write unlikable characters without making them completely detestable and despicable. He definitely gets what's coming to him in this one. But yeah, overall, my least favorite of the franchise. I think my main problem is the whole cult angle. that just takes away any scariness from Michael Myers. Halloween H2O, 20 years later. This is a great movie. I think this is easily the best version of Laurie Strode. She kicks ass, but she isn't as over the top. Her character isn't quite as dramatic, I guess, as we see her portrayed in 2018. But I have different reasons for liking 2018 for my placement for that. I'll get to that in a little bit. I do think so. This is going to go up in Happy Halloween. I think I prefer Halloween 4 slightly more, just because for H2O, it does take a while for the action to really get going, like about the 50-minute mark for anything to really like happen. Yes, you need build up in movies, but for slashers, part of the reason we show up to watch them is for the kills. And also, Halloween 4 definitely has more Halloween-y vibes, the sort of autumnal vibes that I really dig when I watch these movies. H2O is set in California, so you're not going to get that autumnal look to this film. That's fine, but, just a small complaint. Jamie Lee Curtis, so going back to sort of the pacing of this film, Jamie Lee Curtis herself in the documentary of this says that the movie really gets started at the hour and 10-minute mark when Laurie versus Michael begins, and from there on it's absolutely badass. If this film had the intensity of the last 20 minutes throughout, and also the production value that we see with David Gordon Green's trilogy, I think this would easily be a top tier film for me. It's definitely the Screamified version. Scream was popular, came out before this. It's the Screamified version of Halloween, but I love Scream, so I'm totally fine with that. So that adds to my liking of this film. You can't talk about this film without talking about the multitude of goofy and weird mask changes throughout this film. I think this is the film that has, for a brief shot, the CGI mask. I don't know what the heck happened there. They talk about the masks quite a bit in the commentary. They originally shot a lot of scenes with the mask they wanted, but then I guess the studio said, nope, we don't like that mask, so they had to do a lot of reshoots. So that put the filmmakers in a bind. What happens at the beginning of Resurrection kind of takes this one down for me, but if you can watch it as its own sort of end to the trilogy of Halloween 1, 2, and H2O, I think it's the strongest trilogy in the franchise, as a complete hold following Laurie Strode's journey. But yeah, I think it's a great film. It's super fun. So there it goes in Happy Halloween. Halloween Resurrection. When I look at other people's rankings, this, for the most part, typically comes towards the bottom, and it's not going to go on the bottom tier for me. It's going to go in Trick or Treat Motherfucker. As I just mentioned, the first 15 minutes of this movie can just get in the dumpster. It undoes easily one of the best endings in the franchise. Again, like I said before, something this series does a lot. But once you get past that, it becomes a dumb, fun, so bad it's not, maybe not so bad it's good, but so bad it's okay. It's an enjoyable movie. At the very least, it's not boring. The idea of trying to stay in the Myers house for a night is indeed interesting, and it's entirely believable that people would think that Michael killing the contestants live on camera would be staged. I can easily imagine, a set of streamers doing this, trying to undertake this challenge, and their chat being like, lol, that's fake. Maybe if they ever try to remake this, that could be a silly angle for a dumb fun idea. I don't know. It's dumb. Like I said, the first part can just go away, but it's entertaining. Busta Rhymes definitely provides the dangertainment. So there it sits in Trick or Treat Motherfucker. Next, Rob Zombie's Halloween. So I first watched this film way back and absolutely hated it. I just remember being so uncomfortable throughout most of this movie. I watched the director's cut because it was the only... this time around, I watched the director's cut because it was the only way I could listen to Rob Zombie's commentary, which he is really interesting to listen to. I think he is a good filmmaker. I just wish he would let someone else write his dialogue. Good Lord, his dialogue is terrible. The first scene of Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 is easily the worst part of any Halloween movie for me. Even worse than the first 15 minutes of Halloween Resurrection, and that's saying something. It's just white trash dialogue. Every line, and that seems to be Rob Zombie's default dialogue choice, which I wish he would let someone else write his dialogue. The rest of the first act is also pretty uncomfortable to watch, and to be honest, that's not why I watch horror movies. Maybe that sounds sort of strange to some people, but I watch horror movies to be entertained, for the enjoyment, for the thrill, not to just be uncomfortable throughout most of it. I'm not completely against the idea, so speaking of his writing, I'm not completely against the idea of giving Michael some sort of backstory if it's done well, but I do think it's scarier if, like we've seen in the original, that it's much scarier if it's just some guy in a mask that snapped. He's the embodiment of evil. There's no rhyme or reason behind him. I think, giving him a backstory, his mom or sister wouldn't take him trick-or-treating, sort of sent him over the edge. I don't know if that's an accurate portrayal. That's sort of a straw man. But anyway, it's just, I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. Once you get past the first 50 or so minutes, it turns into just like an amped up version of the original. I'd rather watch the original, of course, but this is a action-packed, extended, gorier version of that, and it's not bad. There is a certain scene in the director's cut, an SA scene, that just did not need to be in there at all. That's the only reason I would say watch the theatrical cut over the director's cut. You take that scene out, the director's cut's better. Yeah, I like Malcolm McDowell's version of Loomis. I think he does a good job in this one. And I also like that it's, as far as I know, the start of Daniel Harris's and Scout Taylor Compton's friendship that has remained to this day. They have the podcast together. I like that Daniel Harris came back as our version of Annie in this one. So I think this one's okay. It teeters on either going to the top end of Trick or Treat, Motherfucker, or the bottom end of I Shot Him 6 Times. I think I'm going to go with the bottom end of I Shot Him. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Oh, this is going to be one of my hot takes. I know I'm not the only one that has this take. There are several horror YouTubers I follow that will agree with me on this. I think this is a pretty good movie. I think it is way overhated. It still definitely has that Rob Zombie trashy dialogue I don't like. Richard Brake's character at the beginning is just so gross. And the part where he's like, fuck, 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 fuck. It looks like, I don't know if it was in the script or something, it looks like he forgot how many times he was supposed to say fuck, or if it's just like because he has like definitely brain damage at that point. He looks all confused, but that part makes me laugh. But nothing in this makes me as uncomfortable as the first 15 minutes or so of the Rob Zombie's first Halloween. I like Tyler Mane. I like Tyler Mane in both 1 and 2 as Michael Myers. He is in this one, in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. He's definitely as intense as we've ever seen him, at least up until Halloween Kills. And I don't like the way the ripped mask looks. It's too tattered for my preference, but I like when he puts it on. That's like his kill engage mode. That's when he's going in for the kill. Brad Dourif in this movie is just awesome. Such a phenomenal performance. I think he's the real standout. The scene where he discovers Annie in the bathroom is just absolutely heartbreaking. I think he goes all in. He's absolutely great in every scene that he's in. The relationship between Scout Taylor Compton and Danielle Harris in this, I think, remains really strong. Between Laurie and Annie. Don't know why these are their real names. Even though Laurie is a lot meaner in this one. She's going through the trauma that she experienced in the first one, but she's super insensitive to Annie getting attacked. But nevertheless, in the scenes where Laurie realized that she's messed up, like, you can tell that there was real, like, sort of friendship there like with the actresses, I think. Loomis sucks a lot in this one. Like, it's such a swing from his portrayal in the first one to this one. Yeah, I can't defend Loomis so much in this one. He does attempt to redeem himself towards the end of this, but it's kind of little too late. I like that it's not. So I think Rob Zombie's hands were tied with making the first one, just doing, repeating the plot beats of John Carpenter's original. And I like that Halloween 2 has its own story. So it gets some creativity points for me from there. And I also really like that it's the only time throughout the entire series where we get to see that Laurie Strode finds out that she is Michael Myers' sister. And Scout's reaction to that scene when she's reading Loomis's book in the car, I think, is just really well done. She breaks down, and yeah, just a great job by Scout in that scene. I'm indifferent towards the whole white horse stuff. It's kind of weird. Again, it's trying to explain what's going on in Michael's head. Kind of takes away the mystery of it. With the white horse stuff and Sherry Moon Zombie being in there, it just seemed like an excuse for Rob to put his wife into the film, which he does with all of his films. Kudos to them. He clearly loves her, but I don't think she's that great of an actress. Yeah. The ending of the director's cut. I forget if I mentioned I watched the director's cut of this. The ending of the director's cut is pretty bad. Michael should not talk ever. So for just the ending alone, maybe watch the theatrical cut. But the ending to this movie, at least with the director's cut, is pretty tragic. Like, it's a very tragic ending to Laurie's story. According to Rob Zombie, she definitively died, and when you see her in the insane asylum, that's, I don't know, supposed to be some sort of representation of her afterlife. But yeah, it's a pretty tragic end to Laurie's story. So where is Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 gonna go? I like it quite a bit. Hot take, it is going at the bottom end of Happy Halloween. I enjoy this one. Yeah, so there it sits. David Gordon Green's trilogy, starting with Halloween 2018. I absolutely love this film. It is my second favorite in the franchise. I fully acknowledge that this is not a perfect movie. There's some unneeded humor in it, with the dad and some of the friends, the teenagers, right? It repeats a lot of plot beats from the first film, but I have a special reason for why this movie gets 5 stars from me, why it's up there with the original. It's very important to me. It was the last movie I got to see in theaters with my best friend before his untimely passing. And he was the one that really got me to love horror movies. I wasn't a horror fan before I met him in college, and we would always watch this movie together whenever we would go to visit one another. But even that special reason aside, that is, a primary reason why I love it so much. But that reason aside, I do think it is a great Halloween film. It has the atmosphere I look for. It has good kills. Michael looks great. The mask is awesome. Yeah, it serves well as a legacy sequel. Maybe the portrayal of Laurie's trauma is a bit much, but maybe that's realistic for someone. I don't know. But she does definitely kick some ass in this later on, like towards the end. I think the third act in this is really fun. The score, the atmosphere, all the stuff I've mentioned, the production design, the production values are all great. James Jude Courtney is easily the best Myers. He might even be better than Nick Castle. I don't know, because he's pretty vicious, but there's a reason I have these two at the top. Halloween Kills. Another instance of this franchise having a good ending and then following up with a disappointment. Halloween Kills was a major letdown for me after 2018. The opening cutscenes, the opening scenes of Halloween Kills, I think are pretty awesome. They're pretty great. Like the flashback to 1978 after Michael leaves Laurie alone, I guess, and his arrest. And also the scene where Michael fights the firefighters. It's pretty fucking awesome. It's pretty badass. But after those parts, it pretty steadily goes down. From there, the non-Michael parts, I think, just really bring this movie down. The dialogue, oh my God, it's just so excessively over-dramatized. The things they say in this movie work when Dr. Loomis said them in some of the earlier films, but it's just not how regular people talk. The evil must die. It's infecting the town. Evil dies tonight. Just all that crap. It's just terrible writing. Speaking of bad writing, the very on-the-nose sort of critique and representation of mob mentality, I hate it. You'd think at least these people would know what the most famous serial killer from their town looks like. He certainly doesn't look like fucking Danny DeVito. I think it would have been better if somehow they got Nick Castle to portray that character, the character they're chasing throughout the hospital. I think that would have worked a lot better and also just been a nice callback. But that's not what we got. We got this portly guy running throughout the hospital and he jumps to his death. You feel bad for him. And then the mob breaks apart. Oh, we made a mistake. It's like, yeah, no shit. Tommy Doyle's characterization in this, I do not like whatsoever. I think he's pretty insufferable. Like I mentioned earlier, I prefer actually Paul Rudd's characterization in Halloween 6. He's just, he's over the top. He adds to that just overly dramatized version. Like, this group of people with Tommy at their center like meet together at this bar every Halloween, but it's totally unclear like if Laurie meets with them too normally. Like, I think if they wanted to establish that Laurie and Tommy had like maintained a relationship throughout the 40 years, I think maybe having a flashback to like a couple of their meetings, maybe the group of friends, Lonnie, Tommy, and the rest of that group, like maybe trying to help Laurie come out of her shell a little bit. Maybe that could have been well done, but we don't get any of that. It's just like, oh, has she maintained a friendship with these people? We don't know. Anyway, going on. On the flip side of this, if you come to this movie just looking for carnage candy and gore and kills, this is the Halloween film for you. Michael I don't know who's more vicious, Halloween 2 Michael or Halloween Kills Michael, but they're some of the best kills that we see in the franchise in this movie. And despite my complaints, I like seeing the Michael side of the story. It's going to go to the top of I Shot Him 6 Times if Halloween 2 wants to cooperate. I still get entertainment from it. Similarly with Halloween 2, it's not a movie I'm ever going to watch just by itself. But since I love 2018, if I'm ever in the mood to watch 2 Halloweens back to back, if I watch 2018 and Halloween Kills, I enjoy it. Same thing with the original Halloween and the original Halloween 2. If I watch them back to back, I quite enjoy them. So yeah, they go in the middle for me. I Shot Him 6 Times. Yeah, they're enjoyable. Definitely have their problems. And finally, Halloween Ends. Ugh, I hate to end on a down note. There are parts that I like to this movie. I like the last bit, of course, because I like the Laurie Michael side of the story. But overall, the majority of this film is very disappointing. It is not the movie that should have ended this trilogy. I'm fine, totally fine with Halloween going off and doing, taking the franchise in a new direction. You shouldn't do that when you're trying to end a trilogy that originally we were told was supposed to, all 3 films take place in one night. The events of 2020 happened. They had to delay things. It seems like they rewrote the story. You can tell that the last half hour of this was originally probably supposed to go on the end of Kills. But overall, this is just one big metaphor about the evil infecting the town. It just seems to come out of left field with no rhyme or reason, and it totally didn't land for me. Corey Cunningham as a character, I think, is okay. I feel really bad for him throughout most of this film, and You know, when you're just spending most of the film feeling bad for a character, that's never going to entertain me, not just in horror, but in films in general. If this was indeed planned from the beginning, they should have introduced Corey back in 2018, and we should have seen him sort of sprinkled throughout the entire trilogy. Just coming in out of nowhere didn't work. And ultimately, his arc amounts to nothing. He gets killed at the end, so it just seems like it's wasted time. Overall, very disappointed in this film. But there are parts that I'm entertained. I do like that last act, so this is another one that sort of teeters between two. I watched it last night. I think I'm gonna put it at the tail end of Trick or Treat, motherfucker. I love this franchise. It's easily one of my favorites of all time. It's not my favorite horror franchise. That could be another tier list to do someday. But for right now, this is where I rank the Halloween franchises. I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, that's all I got. Happy Halloween, everyone.